Don't even think about running. The whisper was a ghost, a thread of sound in the thunderous silence of the bank lobby. Sophia Lel froze, every muscle in her body screaming to sprint for the exit she had spotted just seconds before. The glass doors seemed a lifetime away, a shimmering portal to a world that no longer existed. She was on the floor, the cold marble pressing into the silk of her blouse, the air thick with the smell of fear and disinfectant. She turned her head just a fraction of an inch. The man lying beside her was the janitor. She'd seen him 100 times in this very bank, a phantom with a cart and a mop. Now his face was inches from hers, his eyes dark and intense. His deep brown skin provided a stark contrast to the pale marble floor. "They'll shoot you before you take a second step," he breathed, his voice barely disturbing the air. His janitor's uniform was dusty, but his gaze was clean, sharp, and utterly devoid of panic. It was that calm that terrified her more than the shouting men with assault rifles. "Who are you?" she mouthed, her own voice stolen by terror. "Someone telling you to stay alive. Keep your head down." There were 7 of them, dressed in black tactical gear, masks hiding their faces. They moved with a chilling, fluid grace that spoke not of desperation, but of endless rehearsal. 1 stood guard at the doors, 2 swept the upper mezzanine, and the other 4 controlled the main floor. They didn't scream for everyone to get down. They directed them with sharp, precise hand signals like sheepdogs herding a panicked flock. Sophia, CEO of Lowell Industries, was used to being in command. Lying helpless on the floor was a dizzying, infuriating new sensation. The man beside her, Darius, his name tag read, shifted slightly. "See the one in the corner?" he whispered, his eyes flicking toward a man holding a rifle, his posture relaxed but ready. "Look at his finger. It's outside the trigger guard. He's not a strung-out junkie. He's a soldier. They all are." Sophia followed his gaze. He was right. There was no nervous twitching, no wasted motion. It was a hostile takeover executed with the precision of a corporate merger. Her mind raced. This wasn't random. It couldn't be. "And him," Darius added, his chin tilting toward the line of bank employees forced to lie with the customers. One of the tellers, a young man named Colin, was staring straight ahead, his breathing even, his hands resting calmly behind his head. The woman next to him was sobbing uncontrollably. Colin looked bored. "He's with them," Darius stated, not as a guess, but as a fact. "He hasn't looked at the guns once. He's been watching us." A cold dread, deeper than the fear of the guns, washed over Sophia. An inside man, a professional team. Darius's quiet observations were painting a picture she didn't want to see. This wasn't just a robbery, it was an operation. The leader of the crew, a broad-shouldered man with a voice like gravel, grabbed the bank manager by his collar. "The vault! Now!" He dragged the trembling manager toward the massive circular door at the back of the lobby. It was all for show, Sophia realized. A perfect, bloody piece of theater. The robbers made a great display of forcing the manager through the security protocols, shouting about the money. 2 of them followed, carrying large duffel bags. They were playing the part of common bank robbers flawlessly, creating a narrative for the police, for the media, a simple, violent smash and grab. But while the main group was occupied with the vault, the insider, Colin, caught the leader's eye. A subtle nod was exchanged. Colin then rose smoothly to his feet. "You 2 with me," he said to 2 of the other robbers, his voice crisp and authoritative, shedding the terrified hostage persona like a snake shedding its skin. Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. They moved not toward the main vault, but to a smaller, reinforced door marked private securities. This was it, the real reason they were here. Darius's hand brushed her arm, a silent command to stay still. "Don't watch them," he breathed. "Look at the floor. Be small. Be nothing." She obeyed, pressing her cheek against the cold marble, the sounds of the heist echoing around her, the clank of metal, the whirring of the vault's tumblers, the rustle of cash being thrown into bags. It was all a distraction. She knew what was in that room, her life's work, the only existing prototype of the Helios chip, a piece of technology so revolutionary it would make her company a global titan, or in the wrong hands, a global threat. And the only person who knew its true potential, the only person ruthless enough to stage something like this, was her rival, Leland Crew. The leader of the crew emerged from the vault, his men hauling bags bulging with cash. He walked slowly along the line of hostages, his boots clicking on the marble. He was projecting dominance, ensuring compliance. He stopped, his shadow falling over Sophia. She could feel his gaze on her, a physical weight. He knew exactly who she was. He leaned down, his voice a low growl meant only for her. "Your board sends its regards." He straightened up and bellowed to his team. "We're out. Go, go, go." The men began to move toward the doors in a disciplined retreat, a whirlwind of black gear and stolen money. This was it, the moment of escape, the moment the violence could either end or escalate into something worse. Sophia held her breath, praying they would just leave. But they didn't. Not all of them. 6 of the robbers backed out of the main doors, maintaining a perfect perimeter, their weapons scanning the street. The 7th, a wiry man with twitchy eyes, lagged behind. His gaze fell on Sophia, and a greedy, opportunistic glint appeared in his eyes. In the calculus of their escape, a high-profile CEO would be the ultimate insurance policy. He broke formation, lunging toward her. "You're coming with us," he snarled, his hand reaching for her arm. A gasp went through the remaining hostages. Sophia's blood ran cold. But before the man's fingers could even brush her sleeve, Darius moved. It wasn't a fight. It was a physics lesson. From his position on the floor, Darius uncoiled like a spring-loaded trap. In a single fluid motion, he drove his elbow into the back of the robber's knee, buckling the leg instantly. As the man fell forward with a grunt of pain, Darius was already on his feet, one hand clamping down on the man's wrist, twisting it at an unnatural angle. The assault rifle clattered to the marble floor, his other hand chopped down on the man's neck just below the ear. The robber went limp, his eyes rolling back as he crumpled into an unconscious heap. The entire sequence took less than 3 seconds. The lobby erupted. A few hostages screamed, others scrambled away from the sudden violence. From the doorway, the leader of the crew, let out a string of curses, his head snapping back toward the scene. He raised his rifle, aiming directly at Darius. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. Sophia stared down the barrel of the gun, convinced they were both about to die, but the leader didn't shoot. Sirens were screaming in the distance now, sharp and getting closer. A clean escape was turning messy. He made a decision. "Grab him! Leave her! Go!" he roared. 2 of his men rushed back in, firing a volley of shots into the ceiling, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Plaster rained down. Under the cover of the noise and panic, they hauled their unconscious comrade to his feet and dragged him out of the door. The leader held his aim on Darius for a second longer, his eyes behind the mask burning with a cold, hateful promise. Then he too was gone. The glass doors swung shut. Silence descended, broken only by the whimpers of the hostages and the approaching sirens. Sophia was still on the floor, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. She stared at the spot where the robber had fallen, then at Darius. He stood over the dropped rifle, his chest rising and falling in a steady, controlled rhythm. He wasn't even breathing hard. The sudden, raw display of martial skill from a black man in a janitor's uniform was a shock. He was no janitor. He was a weapon. The spell broke. People started to sit up, their movements jerky, their faces a mixture of relief and disbelief. Darius nudged the rifle with his foot, pushing it away. He then turned and offered Sophia a hand. His dark brown palm was rough, calloused, and steady. She took it and he pulled her to her feet as if she weighed nothing. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice back to a low, even tone. I think so," she stammered, her gaze fixed on his face. How did you... "Instinct," he said, cutting her off. He was already scanning the room, his eyes cataloging every detail, every exit, every potential threat. The sirens were almost on top of them. Red and blue lights began to flash through the bank's tall windows. "I have to go," he said abruptly. "Go. But the police, they'll want to talk to you. You're a hero." A humorless smile touched his lips. "I'm not a hero. I'm a father, and my daughter is waiting for me." He started moving toward a service door behind the teller counters, a door Sophia never even knew existed. "Wait," she called after him, her voice trembling. He knew my name, their leader. He said, the board sends its regards. This was about my company. They took my prototype. Darius paused at the door, his back to her. "Then this is just the beginning," he said, his voice grim. "They'll come for you to make sure you can't talk." And now he glanced back at her, his dark eyes holding a flicker of something that looked like regret. "Now they'll come for me too." Before she could respond, he slipped through the service door and was gone. Moments later, the police swarmed in, their weapons drawn, shouting commands. The scene dissolved into a controlled chaos of paramedics, detectives, and forensics teams. Sophia found herself wrapped in a coarse blanket, a cup of lukewarm tea trembling in her hands as she gave her statement to a weary-looking detective named Miller. She told him everything: the military precision of the crew, the calm insider at the teller station, the specific targeting of her security box, the leader's chilling message, and she told him about the janitor. Miller listened with a patient, practiced expression, nodding as he took notes, but she could see the skepticism in his eyes. "Ma'am," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "you've been through a severe trauma. It's common for the mind to try and make sense of things, to see patterns. But what we have here is a straightforward, if very well organized, bank robbery. They hit the main vault hard. We have eyewitnesses, shell casings, the works. It'll be the top story on the news tonight." "But the janitor," she insisted, "he took one of them down. He saved my life." "We're trying to locate the employee now, Darius King. He seems to have left the scene. Honestly, in these situations, some people just panic and run. We'll find him." He patted her shoulder. "You're safe now, Miss Lel. Why don't you let one of my officers drive you home? We can talk more tomorrow when you've had some rest." His words were meant to be comforting, but they landed like stones. He didn't believe her. To him, she was just another hysterical victim. He saw a bank robbery. She saw the opening move in a war. She looked around the lobby, now crawling with uniformed officers. She searched for the one face that shared her reality, the one person who understood the true nature of the danger they were in. But there was only an abandoned mop and bucket near the wall, and a faint, clean scent of disinfectant. Darius King was gone, and Sophia Lel had never felt so alone. The service door opened into a grimy back alley that smelled of wet cardboard and old grease. Darius King didn't slow down. He melted into the afternoon shadows, moving with a purpose that had been dormant for 6 long years. Every step was deliberate, every glance a threat assessment. He scanned rooftops, doorways, the reflections in shop windows. A black man moving with his intensity in the affluent downtown of Atlanta was already an anomaly. Now he had to become a ghost. The instincts buried under years of pushing a mop and packing a school lunch were now screaming back to life. He was no longer just a janitor. He was prey. He took a winding, indirect route, boarding a bus for 3 stops, exiting through the back, then ducking into a subway station only to emerge 2 blocks away. It was a routine he hadn't practiced since his last tour, a dance of misdirection designed to shed a tail. He felt a grim certainty that he was being hunted. The look in the robbery leader's eyes had been a contract. An hour later, he stood across the street from the small 3-story apartment building he called home in Atlanta. He watched it for 15 minutes, hidden in the awning of a closed bookstore, searching for the telltale signs. A parked car with 2 men in it, a utility van that didn't belong, a figure watching from a window. He saw nothing out of the ordinary, but that meant little. The best hunters were the ones you never saw. He entered through the rear entrance, taking the stairs to the 2nd floor before putting his key in the lock of apartment 2B. He paused. He pulled a single strand of his own hair from his collar and looked at the nearly invisible spot on the door jamb where he had placed another one that morning. It was gone. His blood went cold. Someone had been inside his home. He drew a slow, silent breath, forcing the surge of adrenaline into a cold, sharp focus. He opened the door, not like a resident, but like an operator clearing a room. It swung inward to reveal the small, tidy living room. Everything looked normal. A stack of Amara's drawings was on the coffee table. Her worn teddy bear patches was propped on the sofa. To a normal person, nothing was amiss. But Darius saw the subtle disturbances. The corner of the rug was turned up by a fraction of an inch. A framed photo on the mantelpiece. A beautiful black family. Darius, his late wife Maria, their faces warm brown. Maria, with her hair in a cascade of tight curls, was angled slightly to the left. They hadn't been looking for something. They had been sending a message. "We know where you live. We can get to what you love." A wave of nausea and pure, unadulterated rage washed over him. He swept the small apartment in 30 seconds. No one was there. They were long gone. He walked into his daughter's room. It was pink and bright, a sanctuary of innocence. He knelt and looked under her bed. He gently lifted her pillow. They hadn't touched anything in here. It was a professional courtesy he didn't appreciate. His phone buzzed. It was Mrs. Gable from next door. "Darius, dear, Amara is getting restless. Are you on your way?" 5 minutes, he said, his voice impossibly steady. He had to act normal. For Amara, the world had to remain safe and predictable. Meanwhile, Sophia Lel was in her penthouse apartment, a glass box overlooking the city. A private security team now stood guard in her lobby, and her head of security, a former Secret Service agent named Frank, was outlining a new protocol. She wasn't listening. She was staring at her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling window, seeing the ghost of the bank leader's eyes staring back. "They're not after my money, Frank," she said, turning from the window. "They were after Helios. This was Leland Crew." Frank's expression was patient, the same one Detective Miller had used. "Sophia, Crew is a shark, but he's not a mercenary. We have no evidence linking him to this. The police are treating it as an armed robbery." "The police are wrong," she snapped, her voice echoing in the cavernous room. "And the one person who knows they're wrong is gone." She strode to her desk and pulled up her tablet. She wasn't helpless. She was the CEO of a billion-dollar tech company. "Get me the employee file for a Darius King. He works for the sanitation contractor A1 Janitorial Services. I want everything. His address, his next of kin, his service record, everything." "Sophia, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to find the only person I can trust in this city," she said, her fingers flying across the screen. An hour later, she had it. The address for Darius King, a grainy photo from his employee ID, a sparse file that listed one dependent, Amara King, age 9. There was no service record, no past employment history beyond the last 6 years with the cleaning company. He was a ghost before that. She looked at the address. It was in a quiet, working-class neighborhood across town, a world away from her penthouse. She knew what she had to do. Frank protested, insisting on sending a security detail. She refused. "These people are professionals, Frank. A security team will be a beacon. They'll see us coming a mile away." "I'm going alone." "That's insane." "No," she said, grabbing her car keys. "Trusting anyone else right now is what's insane." Darius had just finished telling Amara a bedtime story. He had checked the locks 3 times. He had wedged a chair under the doorknob. He was packing a small duffel bag in the dark of his living room, cash, a burner phone, a set of fake IDs he prayed he'd never have to use again, and a first aid kit. They couldn't stay here. He didn't know where they would go, but they had to disappear before morning. He looked over at the photo on the mantelpiece, the one the intruders had moved. It was his favorite picture of his wife smiling on a hiking trip just months before the crash. "I'll keep her safe, Maria," he promised silently. "I swear it." A soft knock came at the door. Darius froze, every muscle tensing. It wasn't the police. They would have announced themselves. It wasn't a neighbor at this hour. He grabbed the heaviest thing he could find, a cast iron skillet from the kitchen, and moved silently to the door, pressing his back against the wall. He held the skillet like a weapon. The knock came again, a little more insistent this time. He risked a glance through the peephole. His breath caught in his throat. Standing in the dimly lit hallway of his apartment building, looking completely out of place in her expensive coat, was Sophia Lel. Darius lowered the skillet, his mind racing. Her being here was a tactical impossibility. It meant she was either incredibly reckless or incredibly resourceful. He wasn't sure which was more dangerous. He unlatched the 3 deadbolts he had just secured and pulled the chair away from the door. He opened it just wide enough to slip through, closing it behind him so she couldn't see inside his apartment. He stood in the hallway, blocking the entrance, his body language a solid wall. "How did you find me?" he asked, his voice low and hard. Sophia wasn't intimidated. "I run a technology company, Mr. King. Finding an address is not a challenge. We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about. You need to leave now. You being here puts my daughter in danger." "We're already in danger," she countered, her voice dropping to a near whisper, her eyes intense. "Both of us. The police think I'm crazy. They're calling it a simple robbery. They don't believe me about the inside man, about the team being professionals, about any of it. You're the only other person who saw what I saw." Darius's jaw tightened. Seeing it and doing something about it are 2 different things. My only job is to protect my daughter. That means disappearing, not getting tangled up with you. "And go where?" she challenged. "They're not just going to let you walk away, not after what you did. They know who you are, what you are, and they've been to my apartment." His dark brown hands tightened into fists, a barely contained tremor of rage passing through him. "My security chief found a listening device professionally installed." She took a step closer. "They're hunting us, Darius. And if we run separately, they'll pick us off one by one." As if on cue, the apartment door creaked open behind him. A small figure in pink pajamas stood there, rubbing her eyes, her teddy bear clutched in one hand. "Daddy, who's that?" "Amara." Darius's entire demeanor shifted. The hard edges of the soldier softened instantly into the protective warmth of a father. He turned and knelt, scooping her into his arms. "It's okay, Sweet Pea. Just a friend from work. Go back to bed." Amara's sleepy gaze fell on Sophia. Her eyes, wide and dark brown, just like her father's, blinked with curiosity. Sophia's breath caught. In the abstract, she knew he had a daughter, but seeing her, small and vulnerable, made the stakes of their situation terrifyingly real. This was the life he had been protecting. This was the heart he was shielding. "You're pretty," Amara murmured, her head resting on Darius's shoulder. A sad smile touched Sophia's lips. "Thank you. You are too." "Otu." Darius carried Amara back inside and tucked her into bed, whispering promises of pancakes in the morning that he knew he couldn't keep. When he returned to the living room, Sophia had stepped just inside the doorway. He didn't protest. The time for pretending they could handle this alone was over. "They've already been here," he said quietly, his voice heavy with a cold fury. He pointed to the framed photograph on the mantel. "That picture was tilted 3 degrees to the left when I got home. The rug was crooked. They were in my house, in her room." He didn't need to say more. The violation hung in the air between them, thick and suffocating. Sophia's face paled. "My God, they wanted me to know," Darius continued, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "It's a psychological game. They're telling me they can get to her any time they want." Sophia looked around the small, warm apartment, a home filled with love and crayon drawings, and felt a surge of anger so fierce it surprised her. Leland Crew wasn't just trying to destroy her company. He was willing to shatter this little girl's world to do it. "You're right," she said, her voice firm with newfound resolve. "We can't run separately. We have to fight back. And to do that, we need to stay alive. We can't stay here. And my penthouse is compromised." Darius nodded, his mind already shifting from defense to strategy. "We need a place that isn't connected to either of us. Somewhere with good sight lines, limited access, and no digital footprint." "I have a place," Sophia offered. "A family cabin. It's remote, up in the mountains. It's not in my name. It's owned by a trust my grandfather set up decades ago. It's completely off the grid." Darius considered it. Remote was good. Off-grid was better. "How many roads lead in?" "One, and it's a private road, gated." "Good. We'll go there for now." He grabbed the duffel bag he had been packing. "We leave in 5 minutes." He looked at her, his eyes assessing her expensive coat and high-heeled boots. "You're going to have to lose those." She nodded without hesitation, a flicker of mutual respect passing between them. He saw her determination, her refusal to be a victim. She saw his focus, the calm competence of a man who knew exactly how to navigate a storm. While Darius woke a groggy Amara, bundling her into a coat over her pajamas, Sophia went to her car and returned with a pair of sneakers and a jacket from her gym bag. When she came back, Darius was standing by the door, holding his sleeping daughter in his arms. Amara's head was nestled in the crook of his neck, her small hand clutching his shirt. The image of his raw, protective strength struck Sophia with a profound intensity. This was a man who would burn down the world for his child, and right now she was inexplicably glad to be standing in his warmth. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," she confirmed. They slipped out of the apartment. Two fugitives and an innocent child, leaving the lights on and the door unlocked to make it look like they were still there. They moved down the back staircase and out into the cold night air, the city lights painting a glittering, indifferent backdrop to their escape. They were no longer a CEO and a janitor. They were survivors, and their war against Leland crew had just begun. The city lights bled away behind them, replaced by the rhythmic sweep of headlights on dark, empty highways. Sophia drove, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. In the rearview mirror, she could see Amara, a small, still form buckled into the back seat, fast asleep, blissfully unaware that her world had been upended. Darius sat in the passenger seat, not relaxing for a moment. He was a study in controlled tension, his eyes constantly moving, checking mirrors, scanning the dark shapes of cars they passed. For nearly an hour they drove in a silence thick with unspoken questions. Finally, Sophia broke it. "Yeah, you never told me you were a soldier." His gaze didn't waver from the side mirror. "I'm not anymore." "But you were," she pressed gently. "Special forces, wasn't it? That takedown at the bank. That wasn't something you learned in a weekend self-defense class." He was quiet for a long moment, the only sound the hum of the tires on asphalt. "I was a lot of things a long time ago," he said finally, his voice flat. "When my wife died, I made a choice. I could either be a soldier or I could be a father. I couldn't be both." He turned his head to look at her, and in the dim dashboard light, she saw the profound exhaustion in his eyes. "I chose hers." The simple finality of his words hung in the air. She understood. Her own career had demanded sacrifices, relationships, a personal life, the chance at a family. She had chosen the boardroom. He had chosen his daughter. "Leland Crew," Darius said, changing the subject. "Tell me about him. Why does he want your prototype badly enough to kill for it?" Sophia took a deep breath. "Leland and I started at the same firm years ago. We were protégés of the same mentor. We were brilliant, competitive, maybe even friends once. But his ambition was different than mine. It was hollow. He didn't want to build things. He just wanted to win, no matter the cost. When our mentor retired, he expected to take over. Instead, the board chose me. He's never forgiven me for it. He started his own rival company, and he's been trying to tear down everything I've built ever since. The Helios chip. It's not just the next step in processing power, it's a quantum leap. It would make his entire company obsolete overnight. So, he hired a kill team to steal it," Darius concluded grimly. "It's not just about business." "It's personal with Leland," she said. "It always is." As she finished speaking, Darius stiffened. "Black sedan, 2 cars back, been with us for the last 10 miles. Sophia's eyes darted to the rearview mirror. A pair of headlights glowed ominously in the darkness. Her heart began to pound. "Are you sure?" "They're keeping perfect pace. Not passing, not falling back. They're professionals." His voice was calm, but the command in it was absolute. "Take the next exit. Don't signal until the last second." The exit ramp was approaching fast. Sophia waited, her palms sweating on the wheel. "Now," Darius commanded. She wrenched the wheel, the high-end sedan responding instantly as she swerved onto the ramp, tires screeching in protest. A horn blared behind them. "Don't slow down," Darius ordered. "Run the stop sign at the bottom of the ramp and make a left. There's a side road a quarter-mile up on the right." "How do you know that?" "I've been studying the map since we left the city." She did as he said, her fear being overridden by a strange sense of trust in his commands. She blew through the stop sign, the car fishtailing slightly before she corrected. She saw the black sedan take the ramp behind them, its movements now aggressive, accelerating hard. They were no longer trying to be subtle. There, Darius pointed. That dirt road. She turned sharply, the car bouncing as it left the smooth pavement for a rutted, unlit track. Branches scraped against the windows. In the back, Amara stirred, murmuring in her sleep. "They're not following," Sophia said, her voice breathless as she glanced in the mirror. "They won't. This road isn't on their route. We'll loop back to the main highway in about 5 miles. They'll assume they lost us," Darius explained. He finally allowed himself to lean back in the seat, though his posture remained alert. He looked over at her. "You did good." The simple praise warmed her in the cold, dark car. "You're not so bad yourself, for a janitor." A genuine small smile touched his lips for the first time. "I have my moments." 2 hours later, they arrived. The cabin was exactly as Sophia had described it. A rustic A-frame structure made of dark wood nestled deep within a forest of towering pines. It was invisible from the main road, a hidden sanctuary. As they got out of the car, the air was crisp and cold, smelling of pine needles and damp earth. While Sophia unlocked the door, Darius did a slow, careful circle of the property, his eyes scanning the tree line, the shadows, the very ground itself. He was like a wolf testing the wind, and Sophia understood that this was a ritual he would perform every time. He returned as she was carrying a still sleeping Amara inside. "It's clean," he announced. The cabin was simple inside. A large stone fireplace dominated the main room, surrounded by comfortable, time-worn furniture. There was a small kitchen and 2 bedrooms upstairs. It was a place built for quiet reflection, not for hiding from killers. Sophia laid Amara down in one of the beds, pulling a thick quilt over her. She came back downstairs to find Darius standing on the front porch, staring out into the impenetrable darkness of the woods. The silence was absolute, a stark contrast to the ever-present hum of the city. "We're safe for tonight," he said without turning around. Sophia came to stand beside him, wrapping her arms around herself against the chill. The adrenaline of the chase was fading, leaving a bone-deep weariness in its place. "But what about tomorrow?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He turned to face her then, his expression serious in the pale moonlight. "Tomorrow," he said, "we stop running and we start fighting back." The sun rose, filtering through the tall pines and soft golden shafts. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Sophia woke not to the jarring alarm of her penthouse, but to the gentle sound of bird song. The air smelled of wood smoke and coffee. Drawn by the aroma, she came downstairs to a scene so disarmingly normal, it felt surreal. Darius stood at the cabin's old-fashioned stove, flipping a pancake with the practiced ease of a man who had done it 1,000 times. Amara sat at the rustic wooden table, crayons scattered around her, diligently focused on a drawing. She was humming a little tune. If you ignored the fact that they were fugitives hiding from a team of professional killers, it could have been any family on any given morning. "Morning," Darius said, not turning around. "There's coffee in the pot. Plates are in the cupboard." Amara looked up and beamed. "Daddy's making bear pancakes, see?" She held up her drawing. It was a picture of a lopsided bear holding a flower. "That's you," she told Sophia, pointing to the flower. Sophia felt an unfamiliar warmth spread through her chest. "It's beautiful, Amara. You're a wonderful artist." "I know," the little girl said, with the simple confidence of a 9-year-old. Sophia poured herself a mug of coffee, her hands wrapping around the heat. She watched Darius place a plate of perfectly shaped bear pancakes in front of his daughter. He moved with a quiet efficiency, a stark contrast to the explosive force she'd seen him unleash in the bank. His movements were fluid, even when flipping the spatula, the deep brown of his forearm showing the quiet strength she now relied on. He was 2 different men, seamlessly integrated into one, the soldier and the father. After breakfast, while Amara was engrossed in a project to draw every animal in the forest, Darius and Sophia sat at the table with a map spread between them. The brief illusion of normalcy evaporated, replaced by the cold reality of their situation. Crew won't stop, Sophia began, her voice low. He can't. As long as we're alive, we're a threat to him. Hiding here buys us time, but that's all. Darius nodded, his finger tracing a route on the map. So, we need leverage. Something to force him onto the defensive. Proof, Sophia said. Something that connects him directly to the heist. Something undeniable that I can take to someone higher up than the city police. The feds, maybe even the attorney general. The men he hired won't talk, Darius stated. Professionals don't. If they're caught, they have a story, and it won't include Leland Crew. Our weak link is the one who wasn't a professional soldier. Colin, Sophia breathed. The bank teller, the insider. Exactly, Darius confirmed. He's the bridge between Crew's world and theirs. If we can get to him, we can make him talk. I can access the bank's employee database, Sophia offered, already thinking through the firewalls and encryption. It's risky. My digital footprint is being monitored, but I have backdoors that not even my own IT department knows about. I can get his address, his financials, see who he's been talking to. Darius shook his head. No, too risky. The moment you touch that server, an alarm will go off somewhere. Crew will know we're making a move. We have to do this the old way. Analog. He looked up from the map, his gaze locking with hers. I'll go back. Sophia's heart skipped a beat. Back to the city. Darius, that's a suicide mission. They're looking for you. They're looking for a janitor who got lucky, he corrected. They're not looking for me. Not the real me. His expression was grim. I can move through that city in ways they won't anticipate. I'll find Colin's address, run surveillance, find the right time and place to approach him. I don't need a computer to find a man who's scared. And trust me, right now, Colin is the most scared man in that city. He's a loose end for them too. It's too dangerous, she insisted, a knot of genuine fear tightening in her stomach. Let me try my way first. Your world has protocols and firewalls, Sophia, he said, his voice firm, but not unkind. In my world, protocols get you killed. You have to be faster, quieter, and more ruthless than the man hunting you. Let me do this my way. They stared at each other across the table. Two commanders from different worlds, each convinced their strategy was superior, but in his steady, determined eyes, Sophia saw not recklessness, but a deep, pragmatic understanding of the enemy they faced. She was a master of the boardroom. He was a master of the battlefield. And right now, they were on a battlefield. She finally gave a slow, reluctant nod. All right, your way. But what do I do? You stay here. You keep her safe, he said, his gaze flicking toward Amara. The weight of that command was heavier than any corporate mandate. That's the most important part of this entire operation. Nothing else matters if she isn't safe. A deep, unspoken understanding passed between them. This wasn't just about a prototype or a company anymore. It was about that little girl humming in the corner. It was about their survival. Darius stood up and began to gather a few supplies. A water bottle, a small knife, a compass. He was preparing to walk back into the lion's den. Sophia watched him, an ache in her chest. She had commanded armies of employees and managed billion-dollar assets, but she had never felt so powerless or so reliant on a single person. He was ready to leave. He walked over to Amara and kissed the top of her head. I have to go run an errand, Sweet Pea. You stay with Sophia, okay? You'll be good for her. Okay, Daddy, Amara said without looking up from her drawing. Be safe always. He walked to the door and paused, looking back at Sophia. Lock this door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me. I'll have a signal. What's the signal? She asked. He hesitated for a fraction of a second. I'll knock 3 times. Pause, then twice more, like a heartbeat. She nodded, memorizing it. He gave her one last look, a look that conveyed the immense trust he was placing in her. Then he slipped out the door and vanished into the silent, waiting woods. The moment the cabin door clicked shut, the silence Darius left behind became a living entity. It pressed in on Sophia, amplifying every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside. She was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, a woman who commanded boardrooms and navigated complex international markets with icy precision. Now she was armed with a secret knock and tasked with protecting a 9-year-old girl from an enemy she couldn't see. She had never felt so utterly out of her depth. She locked the door, her hand trembling slightly, and engaged the heavy deadbolt. She checked every window, ensuring the latches were secure. Her world had shrunk to the 4 walls of this rustic cabin. "Are you scared?" Sophia turned. Amara was standing in the middle of the room, her head tilted, her large, perceptive eyes studying Sophia's face. The question was so direct, so simple, that it disarmed her completely. "A little," Sophia admitted, the honesty surprising her. "But your dad is very brave. He's gone to fix the problem." "He's always brave," Amara said, as if stating a fact of nature, like the sky being blue. "But sometimes he gets sad eyes, especially when he looks at the picture of my mommy." She walked over to the stone hearth and sat down, patting the spot next to her. "You can be scared with me if you want. I'll show you how to draw a protection dragon. They scare away monsters." Something inside Sophia, a wall she had spent a lifetime building, began to crumble. She sat down on the hearth next to the little girl. For the next hour, they sat with paper and crayons, and Amara patiently instructed her on the proper technique for drawing fearsome scales and smoke-snorting nostrils. Sophia's dragon looked more like a bewildered lizard, and the absurdity of it, the simple joy of the moment, made her laugh. It was a real laugh, not the polite, strategic one she used in meetings. It felt foreign and wonderful. She was starting to understand the choice Darius had made. This was the world he had chosen to live in, a world of protection dragons and pancake bears. It was a world worth fighting for. Miles away, the world was anything but gentle. Darius King moved through the city's anonymous arteries like a phantom. He had traded his janitor's uniform for worn jeans, a gray hoodie, and a baseball cap pulled low. He was just another face in the crowd, invisible and forgettable. He didn't go near Colin's address. An address found in a database was a liability, a potential trap. Instead, he went to a small, dusty records office in a forgotten corner of downtown, a place that ran on paper and dial-up modems. Using a fake contractor ID and a story about a zoning dispute, he charmed a bored clerk into giving him the public property tax records for the entire block where the bank was located. An hour later, he had what he needed. Colin Pewitt, owner of a small condo 6 miles away. He didn't go there directly. He approached the neighborhood on foot, circling it, mapping its entrances and exits, noting the sightlines from adjacent buildings. Colin lived on the 3rd floor of a nondescript brick building. There was only one way in and out of the lobby, bad for a quick escape, good for a trap. Darius found his perch in a vacant office space in a building across the street, the window grimy enough to provide perfect cover. From there, he had a clear view of Colin's apartment. He settled in for a long wait. Patience was a weapon, and Darius was exceptionally well armed. It took 3 hours. Just as the sun began to set, Darius saw movement in Colin's window. The blinds twitched. A face peered out, pale and terrified. Colin. He looked like a man haunted by his own choices. A few minutes later, the light in his apartment went on, then off, then on again. He was panicking. As Darius watched, his trained eyes caught something else. A flicker of movement in a dark blue sedan parked halfway down the block. The windows were tinted, but the driver's side was down just an inch. Darius focused, his breathing slowing. He saw the faint red glow of a cigarette, and then briefly the silhouette of a man in the driver's seat. He was slouched down, trying to be inconspicuous, but he wasn't watching the street. He was watching the entrance to Colin's building. Ice flowed through Darius's veins. He wasn't the only one here. Crew was cleaning house. This changed everything. It was no longer a simple surveillance mission. It was a race. Darius's phone, a cheap burner he bought for cash, vibrated. A single text from a number he didn't recognize. Status! It was Sophia. He texted back one word. Compromised. Just then, the front door of Colin's building opened. Colin stumbled out, carrying a hastily packed gym bag, his eyes darting nervously up and down the street. He was making a run for it. Across the street in the blue sedan, a brake light flashed. The engine, which had been off, rumbled to life. Darius's mind processed the variables in a fraction of a second. The cleaner in the car had a direct path to Colin. In 10 seconds, Colin would either be bundled into that car or shot dead on the sidewalk. Darius's position was superior, but his window of opportunity was closing with every step Colin took. He couldn't wait for the perfect moment. He had to create it. Now he pushed himself away from the window, his body coiled and ready. The time for watching was over. The hunt had just begun. Darius burst from the vacant office building side exit, landing on the pavement in a silent crouch. He was a block away from the action, a ghost in the deepening twilight. The blue sedan was already pulling away from the curb, its movement smooth and predatory. Colin was speed-walking, half-jogging down the sidewalk, a sheep fleeing a wolf he didn't yet know was there. Direct intervention was suicide. Darius needed a diversion. His eyes scanned the street, processing details in a rapid-fire sequence. Parked cars, a fire hydrant, a newsstand, a row of overflowing garbage cans. He sprinted into the alley behind the newsstand, his movements a silent blur. He grabbed the lid of a metal trash can and with a powerful, calculated heave, sent it spinning out into the street. It landed with a deafening clang, skittering directly into the path of an oncoming taxi. The taxi driver slammed on his brakes, tires squealing, horn blaring in a long, angry blast. It was the perfect disruption. For a critical second, the driver of the blue sedan reflexively glanced toward the sudden chaos. That was all the time Darius needed. He shot across the street, using the now stopped taxi as cover. He came up behind Colin, who was frozen in place by the noise, and clamped a hand on his shoulder. Not a word, Darius hissed in his ear. Before Colin could even register what was happening, Darius steered him hard right, pulling him into the narrow, dark gap between two buildings. "Who are you? What do you want?" Colin stammered, his body trembling, his face slick with sweat. Darius pressed him back against the cold brick wall, his forearm resting lightly but firmly against Colin's chest. "I'm the guy who just saved your life. Now you're going to be quiet and you're going to listen. The man in the blue car, he's not your ride. He's your undertaker." Colin's eyes widened in disbelief. "What? No. He's my contact. He's here for the final payment." "Is that what he told you?" Darius's voice was laced with cold pity. "They're not paying you, Colin. They're erasing you. You're a loose end. The only thing connecting them to the bank. I saw you inside. I saw you give the signals." The color drained from Colin's face as the truth of Darius's words hit him. He had been a fool, a disposable pawn. His shoulders slumped in defeat. "Oh God, what am I going to do?" "You're going to tell me everything," Darius said, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. "Who was your contact? Where were you supposed to meet him?" "I don't know his name," Colin blurted out, his voice cracking. "I swear I was just supposed to get in the car. He was going to take me to a warehouse by the docks to get the money and a new passport." "Which warehouse?" "Pier 4, the old Kittering warehouse. He told me to be there at 10 tonight if the pickup went wrong." The sound of a car door slamming shut in the street made them both freeze. The cleaner was out of the car. He was starting his search. "We have to move now," Darius said, grabbing Colin by the arm. He pulled him deeper into the alley. "We're not going out the way we came in." He led the terrified teller through a maze of back alleys and service corridors, moving with a confidence that defied the darkness. Every sound was a potential threat, every shadow a possible enemy. Colin stumbled along behind him, a whimpering, clumsy liability that Darius had to drag towards safety. They finally found refuge in the loading dock of a closed restaurant, hidden behind a large, foul-smelling dumpster. Darius pulled out his burner phone. His fingers flew, typing a short, encrypted message to Sophia. "Asset secured. He's a liability. Cleaner is active in the area. Need extraction. Pier 4, Kittering warehouse. 1 hour approach from the south." He hit send. Now it was out of his hands. He had done his part. The rest depended on her. At the cabin, the text alert buzzed, startling Sophia from the night's quiet. She read the message once, then twice, her mind racing. Asset secured. He had Colin. Cleaner is active. He was in immediate danger. Need extraction. The words were a command, a plea, and a profound statement of trust. He wasn't asking her to call for help. He was asking her to be the help. He was trusting her to come for him, to be his cavalry. He was trusting her with his life, just as he had trusted her with his daughter. She looked over at Amara, who had fallen asleep on the couch, her drawing of the protection dragon resting on her chest. Fear, cold and sharp, tried to paralyze her. Leaving the safety of this cabin, taking this child with her, and driving toward a dark pier where a killer was on the loose was insane. It was the opposite of everything a rational person would do. But then she thought of Darius out there in the dark, fighting for them. He was trusting her. A warm wave of resolve washed away the cold fear. She would not let him down. She gently woke Amara. "Hey, sleepyhead," she whispered, her voice much calmer than she felt. "Time for one more car ride, a little adventure." Amara rubbed her eyes. "Are we going to get Daddy?" "Yes, sweetie," Sophia said, her heart aching with the simple hope in the girl's voice. "That's exactly what we're going to do." She bundled Amara into the car, tucking a blanket around her in the back seat. She took a deep breath, started the engine, and pulled the car onto the dark, winding road that led away from the cabin. Her headlights cut a lonely path through the forest. She was no longer hiding. She was no longer a victim. She was a partner, and she was driving into the heart of the storm. The car's navigation system, a calm, disembodied voice, announced she was nearing the destination. Sophia killed the lights and the audio, plunging the car into silence and near total darkness. She was driving through a graveyard of industry. Rusting warehouses loomed like sleeping giants, their windows dark and broken. The air, thick with the damp, salty tang of the harbor, felt heavy and ancient. She followed Darius's instructions precisely, approaching the massive skeletal frame of the Kittering warehouse. From the south, down a narrow, potholed service road, she stopped the car in the deep shadow cast by a derelict grain silo, just as he'd told her. She cut the engine. The silence that followed was absolute. In the back, Amara was a quiet, sleeping lump under a blanket. Sophia's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Every shadow seemed to writhe. Every gust of wind sounded like a footstep. Minutes stretched into an eternity. She was just about to reach for the burner phone when a shape detached itself from the deeper darkness of a loading bay. It was Darius. He moved with a liquid grace, pulling a stumbling, terrified Colin behind him. She unlocked the doors. Darius opened the back and practically shoved Colin inside, who scrambled into the far seat, trying to make himself as small as possible. "Stay down and stay quiet," Darius commanded. He then slid into the passenger seat beside Sophia. "Go," he said, his voice a low, urgent command. Sophia didn't hesitate. She started the engine, the sound roaring to life in the stillness. She flicked on the headlights and slammed the car into drive. But as her beams cut through the night, they illuminated a nightmare. A dark blue sedan, the same one from the city, was blocking the narrow road ahead, its engine rumbling, its own headlights blazing, trapping them in a blinding glare. Two men got out. They were dressed in black, their faces grim, and they held silenced pistols pointed directly at the windshield. "Lock the doors," Darius said, his voice deadly calm. "Do not get out of this car no matter what happens. Do you understand me, Sophia?" She nodded, her throat too tight to speak. "Good," he said. He gave her one quick, intense look, a look that said 1,000 things. Then he opened his door and stepped out into the light. He raised his hands slowly, showing they were empty. "Let them go," Darius said, his voice carrying easily in the quiet night. "Your business is with me." The lead cleaner, the man Darius had seen in the car, gave a thin, cruel smile. "Our business is with all the loose ends. Mr. Crew is very thorough." He gestured with his weapon. "Step away from the car, King. We'll make it quick." Darius took a slow step to the side, drawing their attention, positioning himself so the car was no longer in their direct line of fire. It was the only advantage he could give Sophia and the others. The second man began to circle around trying to get a flanking position. It was a classic pincer move, a fatal mistake. The moment the second man's line of sight was broken by a stack of rusting barrels, Darius moved. He dropped, kicking out and sweeping the lid cleaner's feet from under him. As the man hit the ground, Darius was already on him, his hand striking the man's wrist, sending his pistol skittering away into the darkness. A sharp, precise blow to the temple, and the cleaner went still. The second man, realizing his mistake, turned and fired. The shot was wild, the silenced puff, followed by the ping of a ricochet off a metal container. Darius was already rolling behind the barrels, using the environment as both cover and a weapon. He came up on the other side, silent as a wraith. The gunman was looking for him in the wrong place. Darius didn't give him time to adjust. He slammed into him from behind, driving him face first into the corrugated steel wall of a warehouse. The gun fired once more, harmlessly into the air before Darius disarmed him and delivered a final incapacitating blow. It was over in less than 20 seconds. Darius stood in the sudden silence, breathing heavily, his body bruised but whole. He looked back at the car. The headlights were still blazing. Inside, Sophia was staring at him, her face pale with shock and awe. He started to walk back, but a groan from the ground stopped him. The lead cleaner, tougher than he looked, was pushing himself up onto one elbow, his hand reaching for a backup weapon strapped to his ankle. He was still a threat, but before Darius could react, the roar of an engine filled the air. Sophia slammed the accelerator. The high-performance sedan shot forward, its tires spitting gravel. She didn't aim for the man. She aimed for the space beside him, wrenching the wheel at the last second. The car skidded to a halt, pinning the man's gun hand to the ground under the front tire. He screamed, a raw, agonizing sound. Then Sophia flicked on the high beams, flooding the entire area with blinding, brilliant light. The cleaner was disarmed, disabled, and blinded. Darius walked over, kicked the man's backup weapon away, and looked at Sophia through the windshield. He wasn't smiling, but his eyes were filled with a profound, staggering respect. He got back into the passenger seat, closing the door softly. The only sounds were the hum of the engine and the pained whimpers of the man outside. "You didn't run," he said, his voice raspy. Sophia looked at him, her own fear and adrenaline slowly receding, replaced by an unbreakable calm. "You told me not to," she replied. She backed the car up, turned it around, and drove away from the pier, leaving the two neutralized cleaners in the darkness. In the back seat, Colin was curled into a ball, shaking. The immediate danger was over. They had won. Sophia glanced over at Darius. In the dim glow of the dashboard, she saw a thin trickle of blood running from a cut on his temple. Without thinking, she reached out, her fingers gently brushing his warm brown skin as she wiped it away. The touch was electric, a current of unspoken emotion passing between them. He looked at her, his gaze softening. "We have him," he said, nodding toward Colin in the back. "We have our proof." Sophia's hand lingered on his cheek for a moment longer. "No," she whispered, her eyes holding his. "We have us." They drove away from the harbor, leaving the groans of the cleaners to fade into the night. The adrenaline began to recede, replaced by a strange, hyper-aware calm. In the back seat, Colin was sobbing quietly, a broken man who had just seen the violent reality behind his choices. "Pull over here," Darius said, his voice low. Sophia steered the car into a deserted, alight parking lot under the orange glow of a single street lamp. Darius turned in his seat, his gaze pinning Colin to the door. "Tell us," Darius said, his tone leaving no room for refusal. "Tell us everything from the beginning, the name of your contact, how they paid you, every detail." With the raw terror of the fight still fresh in his mind, Colin's story came spilling out. He spoke of encrypted emails, of cash drops, of a man he only knew as the shepherd who gave him his orders. He confessed that the shepherd was Leland Cruz's head of security. He described the warehouse meeting that was supposed to be his final payday. As he spoke, Sophia recorded his every word on her phone. It was the last nail in Leland Cruz's coffin. When he was finished, a fragile dawn was beginning to break, painting the eastern sky in shades of gray and lavender. The city was waking up, oblivious to the war that had been fought in its shadows. "I have a contact," Sophia said, her voice firm with a renewed sense of purpose. "The deputy director of the FBI's regional office. She owes my family a favor. It's time to call it in." The meeting took place not in an office, but on a moving ferry, the gray waters of the bay churning below them. Deputy Director Reynolds was a sharp, no-nonsense woman who listened to Sophia's story and Colin's recorded confession without interruption. She looked from the powerful CEO to the quiet, intense man standing beside her, a man who clearly did not belong in Sophia's world, yet stood as if he were its guardian. "The men at the pier have been picked up," Reynolds confirmed. "Ex-Special Operations, dishonorably discharged, currently employed by a private security firm wholly owned by a shell corporation that traces back to Leland Crew. This confession from your teller connects the dots. We have enough to move on him." She looked at Sophia. "Mr. Crew is unveiling your stolen technology at the Global Tech Summit tonight. He's arrogant. He feels untouchable. Let's use that." That evening, the grand ballroom of the city's top hotel was filled with reporters, investors, and tech luminaries. On stage, under a massive screen bearing his company's logo, stood Leland Crew. He was at the pinnacle of his triumph, a king addressing his court. "Today we redefine the future," he proclaimed, his voice booming through the speakers. He held up a small, gleaming microchip. "With this, the Helios chip, we will usher in a new era." Just then, the ballroom doors opened. A murmur went through the crowd as Sophia Lel, a woman everyone believed was in seclusion after her recent trauma, walked in. She looked radiant and utterly unshakable. Her eyes met Crew's across the room, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of panic in his confident gaze. He faltered for a moment, then sneered, "Sophia, I'm so glad you could join us to witness the dawn of a new age." "I wouldn't miss it, Leland," she said, her voice calm as she walked toward the stage, "especially since you'll be experiencing a new age of your own." On that cue, Deputy Director Reynolds and a team of plainclothes FBI agents emerged from the wings of the stage. "Leland Crew," Reynolds announced, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. "You are under arrest for corporate espionage, conspiracy, and attempted murder." Crew's face contorted in a mask of rage and disbelief as the agents cuffed him on stage, the stolen chip falling from his limp fingers. The room erupted in a flash of cameras. The public humiliation absolute and complete. Sophia didn't stay to watch. She turned and walked out, meeting Darius, who was waiting for her just outside the doors. He simply held out his hand, and she took it. 6 months later, the world felt new. Leland Crew had been convicted on all counts, his empire crumbling to dust. The Helios chip was back where it belonged, but the real change was in a sun-drenched backyard in a quiet, tree-lined suburb. Darius, now the head of security for Lowell Industries, was flipping burgers on a grill. He wore a simple t-shirt and jeans, a smile on his face. Amara was chasing a giggling puppy across the lawn, and Sophia, dressed not in a power suit, but in a simple summer dress, was setting a picnic table. This was their new home. Not her penthouse, not his apartment, but theirs. Later that evening, as Amara slept soundly upstairs, they sat on the porch swing, the puppy asleep at their feet. The air was warm, filled with a gentle chirp of crickets. "I was thinking," Darius said, his voice soft in the darkness, "about all the things we fought for, the company, the prototype, our lives." "We won, Darius," she whispered, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I know," he said. He turned to face her, taking both of her hands in his. "But I want to fight for something else now, for more mornings like this, for a future, for us." He took a small box from his pocket and opened it. Inside, a simple, elegant ring gleamed in the moonlight. "Sophia Lel, I know my world is nothing like the one you came from, but I'd like it to be the one you come home to. Will you marry me?" Tears of pure, unadulterated joy welled in her eyes. "Yes," she breathed. "Oh, yes." Their wedding was a small affair, held in the backyard of the home they had built together. Amara, as the flower girl and chief puppy wrangler, nearly stole the show. Standing under an arch of white roses, they exchanged their vows. They weren't a CEO and an ex-soldier. They were just Sophia and Darius, two survivors who had found in each other not just a safe harbor, but a home. They had been brought together by violence and fear, but they had chosen to build a life on a foundation, of something much stronger. Love, trust, and the promise of 1,000 pancake bear mornings to come. Thank you for letting me share that story with you. I'm always curious. After the silence settles, what's the one thought or feeling that's staying with you? There's no right or wrong answer. Of course, I just find that sharing those little echoes is what makes these stories truly come alive. Feel free to leave your thought in the comments below. And if you'd like to explore more worlds like this one together, make sure you're subscribed with the notification bell turned on. There are so many more journeys to take. For now, thank you for your time and your imagination. It means the world.